is Nicole Porter. I represent the Sentencing Project, a national research and advocacy organization, and we also urge an unfavorable report on this bill. I want to urge the committee to consider the science that demonstrates what's effective in preventing crime and addressing crime. And we have, at this point, over 40 years of research that has documented the growth of the rate of incarceration and what is proven to be effective at reducing crime and preventing crime. And we know that lengthier prison terms and enhancements have proven to not be effective at reducing or preventing crime. And we know that based on self-report studies of defendants and people who were incarcerated at the time of the offense, what were the contributing factors that led to their criminal offending. Many people were under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Most of the criminal events that led to their incarceration were situational, and most of them had no idea of the impact of their underlying offense and what the potential sentence they may have been subjected to. So the idea around lengthening criminal penalties as a deterrent strategy to preventing crime was done in the 80s through the 90s, and we know is not an effective strategy at actually preventing crime. As is true around the country, the criminal code in Maryland is complex. There are overlapping statutes that give prosecutors and law enforcement practitioners a range of tools that can lengthen prison terms. And I've submitted written testimony, but I'll just say one statistic, that Maryland is among 44 states around the country that have increased the time of people in prison since the early 2000s. And so I'll wrap my comments up there, and more detailed information is provided in my written testimony that's been submitted to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, and thank you for coming today. And I'll just ask the same question I was asking in some of the prior panels. And I know some of the statements were talking about the instances of crime, and even one of my colleagues talked about the price of a person's life, and obviously that's priceless. Those statements aside, that I think detract from what I'm trying to get to and the decision that I'm trying to make, which is basically the resource question, because the resources translate into opportunity and lower levels of crime, in my opinion. But you seem to have some data that you cited in your testimony that would reinforce what my assumptions have been. And I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit more about how Maryland is done in terms of the length of sentencing and the effects on recidivism or prevention of crime. And then if you could furnish this committee with some of those reports that you talked about, that'd be great.
Absolutely. I will certainly follow up with the committee with links to and any other questions you have to the reports that have been done over the last several years. And I will say that in particular, when thinking about crime prevention or reducing crime, the committee should look at questions around deterrence and what we know has been proven to work in deterring offenses, particularly given the focus is on lengthening criminal penalties with the goal of removing people from the community who may have a history of violence or who may be at risk of repeat offending. So deterrence may be and has been proven to be a goal of the criminal justice system and as the function of prison. But we know that people age out of crime, and crime is a factor of many young adults and particularly young men in a handful of neighborhoods around the country, and within Maryland, a handful of neighborhoods within the state of Maryland. And regardless of the overlapping statutes that may lengthen a prison term, the individuals who are at most at risk of committing crime, most of them will age out of criminal offending. So we could impose really long prison sentences on them and even lock them away for life. And in fact, about 20% of people incarcerated in the state of Maryland are sentenced to life prison terms, and the average sentence length has increased since 2000 significantly. And so lengthening prison terms has been a strategy that this body has undertaken and has contributed to incarceration growth within the state. And regardless of the tools that are currently on the books that allow for longer prison sentences, we know that in general people will at some point age out of that. and whether or not this body continues to enhance sentences or takes a serious look at the offenses that are currently on the books. The sentences are already very lengthy and have been lengthened over time since the early 2000s. And I'm happy to provide the reports that have been done that document that change in sentencing trends within Maryland and around the country, and also how Maryland measures up to other states, particularly in the region.
Thank you. I'm curious that this aging out process you referred to, is there a acceptable in the scientific evidence age at which aging out generally occurs?
So I think the science says that the general age crime decline, decline of crime happens in one's mid-30s to late 30s. And so but even if it has been proven that incarceration has some modest effect on increasing or decreasing crime in the general community, there are other contributing solutions that can also prevent crime. And then there's a question of, is it the right thing to do? So in addition to a mix of public safety solutions that looks at law enforcement, also supporting community-based services that would support prevention, and then also looks at incarceration in terms of incapacitation, there's a mix of practices that this body has already undertaken and should continue to look at
I got
in
that,
terms of preventing crime.
This aging out process you talked to, it's like 20 years. We're supposed to tolerate 20 years of armed criminal violence while somebody ages out?
Absolutely not. There are immediate solutions that can be put in, that can be resourced and should be funded by this legislature and should be supported in the communities that are most harmed by crime.
Have there been any studies done?
And there may be police solutions to that, and there may also be the support of community-based organizations that can target people who are most at risk of committing violence.
Have there been studies done of the communities and how their level of tolerance for violence during this aging out process? Are they, the community generally say, look, send Junior back in for another 10 years into the community because we have a great level of tolerance for his violence? Or is the community generally saying, lock him up? What's the community that the perpetrators are coming from and going back to? What are they saying?
I think there's a mix of voices within communities that have high rates of incarceration, are disadvantaged, and also experience high rates of displacement.
There's mixed voices in every community, but do we have any studies about the victims? That's what I'm asking. Studies about the victims.
Let me provide you with a couple of studies from the communities that are most impacted by this.
Yeah,
so within the communities that are most impacted by violence, 50% of youth who are sentenced to life in prison, and Maryland has one of the highest rates of juvenile lifers among states within the country. Over 50% of those youth witnessed violence prior to their criminal offending that sentenced them to a life in prison term. 79% of those youth, those children, reported observing violence in their homes. So one study found that 66% of juveniles who were sentenced to lengthy prison terms actually witnessed a shooting, not a shooting that they committed, but a shooting that they were exposed to prior to their criminal.
But that's not really where I was coming from. You're not answering my question.
Well, those children are coming from the communities that you claim to be most concerned with. Well, they are coming from communities with incredible amounts of violence and with high rates of residents who've been disappeared behind prison walls because of the lengthy prison terms that are already on the books and that have increased.
This is just anecdotal stuff. You're just looking at anecdotal stuff. I was really looking for
No, that's not anecdotal stuff. I'm providing you with statistics from a peer-reviewed study of people who are not only...
What's the name of the study?
It was a study by the Sentencing Project, which is the organization I'm representing, a well-regarded organization that provides research and information regarding criminal justice system.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.